cyclic GAN, how the training happens, especially what is the cost function cyclic GAN. And then we will discuss the RNN doubts you have. Any doubts on RNN you have? So you're able to see the slides now? Are you able to see the slides? Saswat, you are able to see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. So this is regarding cyclic GAN as we discussed in the previous class. So cyclic GAN has say two generators and two discriminators. What they are trying to do is one generator and discriminator pair is trying to transform a say one class of image like zebra to horse. Another discriminator generator pair is trying to transform zebra to horse. Similarly, like same can be the applicable in other applications, say black and white image to color image and color image to black and white image, or sketch to some image and image to sketch kind of thing. Okay, so the pair can be different, but the advantage of cyclic GAN, as we discussed in the last class, is you need not pair them at the beginning. So that means that this image, first image, need to be tagged with one of the image in the other data set. Say zebra, this zebra and this horse are in pair. That you need not say. All zebra or any zebra image you can take, any horse image you can take while training. Okay. And while training, as we discussed, since there are two GANs, so these two GANs have two cost functions. One GAN is to generate zebra from horse and another is horse from zebra. Both of them has adversarial losses. And they will be compared with each of the generated image will be compared with ground truth image. Okay. So that is conventionally just there are two generated discriminators. One is doing zebra to horse and another is doing horse to zebra. What is additionally there is, so here is there is a, so I hope you are able to see the cost function, which is having one adversarial loss as discussed before. This is the first ad. Like for both generator and discriminator pairs, you have one adversarial loss. Okay, so two adversarial losses will be there. That in the total loss. Total loss is in the last expression. In addition to that, there is a cyclic loss. That is, say what we are doing is zebra to horse we are transforming, and then after this transformation, horse to zebra you can transform again with another generator. So now it is through two generators, and then once you get the zebra to horse and horse to zebra again, this zebra can be compared with the ground truth zebra, or the like say whatever zebra image that I supposed to get here should be same after the transformation of two generators. So that is referred to as cyclic consistency loss. Same is the case with the horse as well. Okay, so this is the additional this is the additional custom. So while training, say as we discussed, so you will have one adversarial loss for this. Okay, one adversarial loss for this. Okay, and another loss is for, so if you want to if you start with say generating a zebra to horse and horse to zebra, this zebra has to be compared with generated zebra. Okay, so and this is the cyclic consistency loss. So these three losses, sum of all these losses will be back propagated. Okay, so is this clear now? Saswat?
So the last one, lambda times cyclic of G comma F, this loss is associated with the
both generators.
Both generator combined.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Sir.
Mean square error between what the say the both generators together will generate, that is supposed to get back the original image. Okay, versus the original image that I give.
Okay, sir.
So mean square error or L1 loss, whatever is the loss. Okay. Right. So in training, they may do phase-based manner, as we discussed in the last class. They may not do, say for example, first they may maximize discriminator, then go by next generator, then another discriminator, another generator, and cyclic consistency loss, and then put together all of them. They will try to. So it's like anyway when we do plus plus differentiation with respect to one term, when we are doing only that will come, right? So it is even if the expression is plus plus and like all are plus, while doing back propagation, one term, the associated term only will come for its update. Fine. Okay, let us move on now the discussion to the RNN slides. So I will directly go to the discussion where you have posed some questions. So I hope discussion on the back propagation of through time is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will skip it. So essentially in a recurrent neural network framework. So please note that I have taken some slides for the discussion from the Professor Mitesh Kapra, IIT Madras faculty video lectures, and some slides are from Professor Fifi Lee team. So would like to acknowledge both. The derivation, especially theoretical derivations and all, are good, well discussed in Professor Mitesh Kapra video lectures, and the overall discussion, some of them which say for example how the vanishing gradients and diminishing gradients problem arises and they can be tackled, were well discussed, we simplified in discussion in Professor Fifi's lectures. Okay, so here you people have seen how based on the losses, so you may have say the architecture RNN can be done for say many to one, many to many, or say one to many, etc. So based on the application, we can have different kind of RNN architectures. So if we want to predict, say for example, letters, say one discussion was how to predict words and letters, right? So one usually at the beginning we have a vocabulary. That means, say for example, if I want to predict a set of letters, say I have several words with me, I want to predict the next letter in either of these words. That is my question. Assume that. In such case, what I do, I initially compose a vocabulary that is a combination of all the letters that exist in any of these words. Then that based on it, I give the labels. Okay. So similarly, now if I want to predict words, then what I do, all the database of different words, I will first bring in and make a usually what the people do is word to vector embedding. They do through a slightly different framework. There is a small network to do word to vector embedding. Once they get the vector embeddings, those vectors are the like code vectors, are the training samples for us. Okay, so if you have say all together in several of the sentences are the whole prediction problem, you have say 10,000 words. Okay, then 10,000 different words. These 10,000 different words may occur 10 times or 20 times or 100 times in that sentences, or the sentences can be new from this which are not there in this data set as well. Okay, while testing, for example, for prediction. But the words has to be there in the data set. So if you want to predict. So then what, with these 10,000 data words, we will convert these 10,000 words into vector embeddings. Now, there are some standard, probably a little bit of NLP also they use. And after that, RNN also, there is a small module which will convert word to vector mechanism. And that thing, we, for example, we assume that there is some standard way of doing it. Once you get the vectors, these vectors are like feature vectors for us. For each of these words, you have a feature vector now. Once you get all these feature vectors, it is like 1,000 samples, 10,000 samples you have in the database. That's all. So these 10,000 samples has a sequence, but so how are these sequence? So for example, if you give the first X10 sample, for example, as input, say then the question is, how, say based on the training, what is the next probable sample that the prediction RNN predicts. Say if X10 is the input that I give, that is word corresponding to 10th sample, then 10th vector, then it means that say if the probability in the output is higher for say 8,000 sample, then the next word predicted is 8,000. So 8,000 will come here. So and then based on this say if you have first 10th word at the first position or first in the sentence, and second word in the sentence is 8,000 like word corresponding to 8,000 sample, then what will be the next? That's how the prediction happens. Is this clear now, Saswat?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So while usually people train with reasonably large data sets, so that actually they have they will be able to predict with context and other things as well. So while after learning, they make the through sequence to sequence learning, they understand the context and other things as well over time. So in fact, they can give the summarization of paragraphs. They can even image captioning in a very elegant manner. So they now current RNNs which are well trained have the ability to capture the context, even the question and answers. So all answers will not be same even if you ask slightly like similar questions. So based on the context also they may change, etc. So it also depends upon the training data and other things. Okay, and the attention also will play a role later. Okay, and right. So now the back propagation front, I hope the back propagation from say the losses, computing loss is exactly similar. So if we consider the probabilities for each of these words, 10,000 words, it is a 10,000 labels you are supposed to get. One of the word will be predicted. So it is one sum in one sum position, 0 elsewhere. Okay, and then since it is a binary labeling, you can apply binary cross entropy as the cost function. Okay, so once you have usually you get scores here. So scores to softmax, there is a softmax layer which will convert to probabilities, and after that you will have cross entropy loss, and that back propagated through till the scores, and then the back propagation comes to the matrix here. Each of these branches, as discussed in the previous video lecture, are nothing but neural network layer. Okay. So I suggest respect to CRs to convey that this is the last class for the other students so that they may join quickly. Okay. So once you get the update or back propagation, say this is a neural network layer. So when it is a neural network layer, you know very well how to update the weights. Okay. So it's like feed forward neural network layer. Now this U also is like feed forward neural network layer because there is no like recurrent correction. This is just an intermediate output, that is hidden neuron outputs, and this can also be updated easily. But this W, for example, what is happening is at any state, you have a feedback, say from previous state, and this W, this state again has W within its function. So each HT minus 1 is also function of W, HT minus 2 is also function of W, and so on. So there is a recurrent function or recurrent connection here. Okay, so while back propagation, as we discussed in the previous class, okay, this has to be taken care. Okay, so I will skip all these things. So these we discussed in the previous video lecture, and then while doing the back propagation, that is a derivative delta W's for the connections at the weight layer connections are the weights at the state to state. How we do is through explicit gradients and implicit gradients. Okay, so using both you will get a you will get the total back propagation. Okay, see, you can see here, if you start from H0, there will be 4 W's here, 4 say states. Okay, so all of them will get involved here. Okay, so each time you are finding the explicit derivative with respect to corresponding state to the W and dou S4 by dou S1. So it is derivative of current state with respect to the previous that state. Okay, dou S1 by dou S4, for example, has all these things: dou S4 by dou S3, dou S3 by dou S2, dou S2 by dou S1. Okay, so this is like a simplified notation for writing. So I skip all these things. So when I'm going through the slides, you can stop me wherever you have some doubts or discussion needed. So people have investigated a little bit on the explainability aspects. So making only few of the hidden neurons active, remaining all inactive, that is 0. They can see that they well predict or well corresponds to some of the predictions. Either say end of the paragraphs or questions, etc. And then let us see the input to RNN can also be given as the image features here. So note that the RNN input not necessarily only be the prediction of letters or words, etc. Even the CNN features, because anyway what we are giving as input to any RNN cell are say for example a hidden layer our input at the input layer, what we give is a vector. Okay, in either of the case it is a vector. In this case you may have two vectors, one vector corresponding to vector embedding of the image and another vector corresponding to vector embedding of the word. Okay, embedding means it is just a compact representation you can consider now. Okay, as you can see now, H is now function of X. So X is the input, the vector embedding of the word, and V is the vector embedding of the image, and H is the previous hidden state. Okay, so if you understand CNN, say feed forward neural network and its graphical propagation very well, this notation you can, I hope you can very fairly follow. Usually to complete the sentence, they give end of sentence as well. Okay, start of sentence, end of sentence, these are also embeddings, two different vectors in the data set.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, please ask.
So here the length of the sentence is limited by the output, right? The length of the sentence is limited by the number of output, the output nodes. Yeah. So like, so isn't that a problem if you want the description?
Comes the prediction happens. Say if I'm predicting a sentence answer for question and answer, for example, or machine translation, sometimes there may be 5 words, sometimes there may be 3 words and all, right?
Yes, sir.
So it continues till I get end of sentence. So end of sentence is also a prediction. So till I get that, the prediction continues. So if I get end of sentence after 3 words, it means that I will stop there. If end of sentence comes in 5 words, then I will stop there, etc.
So, sir, like after the once like some part of the sentences we get as an output in the first cycle, then is it fed back to the RNN and then generated for the rest of the sentence? Like, how does it generate the entire sentence? I'm having that down.
Okay, so there are different ways actually. See, for example, here, say in machine translation itself, I can feed this also here and then generate the next sentence. See, the previous whatever, say for example, if I'm giving caption, I can give this as input and this also as input and can generate. That is one way. Other way is, say in another question and answers, for example, assume that after the whole question is done, I will give an answer. Okay, so in that case, what I may do is, say for example, I will not feed back the whole thing. I will only feed back the question, say I learn from state to state initially, and after that only output comes. It is like in the first slide when you see there is a some set of inputs given. There is only no output. Still then there is no output, and then output starts coming, and then there are only few states that are connected to get the output. So it's like that. So it depends upon the configuration, how you are training and application. Fine.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
Yeah. So we'll move on. So this I hope you are able to understand, right? Why? What is the problem of diminishing and exploding gradients? So here, for example, if I'm in forward pass from state to state, assume that I want to find dou H4 by dou H0. Okay, then dou H4 by dou H0 involves W power 4 in rough sense. That means 4 times W gets multiplied in that back propagation expression. In W or W transpose. Okay, in forward propagation, W gets multiplied. In reverse, like back propagation, I will have W transpose into something, W transpose into something, etc. in between. Okay, 4 times this W transpose will come in that expression. So neglecting the other terms, if we consider that W transpose power 4 is involved in back propagation, then what will happen if I want to find dou H10 by dou H0? Then W power 10 will come, or W transpose power 10 will come. So the W transpose power 10, is it well conditioned or not? For example, that means is the output from W multiplying with W transpose 10 will to some vector, some gradient vector or the error vector, output loss vector, will it output loss gradient vector, will it be significant to back propagate it the initial layers is the question. Sometimes it may not be, because what will happen is W, if we just decompose in eigenvalues and eigenvectors are singular values, what will happen is so U lambda V transpose you can write, and lambda is the eigenvalues. So if you raise this W power 10, lambda power 10 will come in between. Okay, in diagonalization. Lambda power 10, if each eigenvalue, in fact, some of the eigenvalues are small, then what will happen? They will become 0. Less than 1, any eigenvalue less than 1 will become 0. Any eigenvalue greater than 1 will explode. So it will have a problem of exploding and diminishing gradients. Okay. So the diminishing gradient problem is there consistently in this architecture. So you cannot avoid it. Exploding gradient problem can be done through clipping. So clipping is finding the like gradient norm and then probably dividing by gradient norm. So it is, in some sense, I am just normalizing the thing, so that actually I am bringing the scale to down, scale down. So it helps in avoiding the exploding gradient problem. But since all the values in the gradient are the say eigenvalues will be less than 1. Okay, so that in some sense fixes the exploding gradient problem. But for fixing the diminishing gradient problem, usually architecture modifications are suggested and done. So that is in LSTM. Okay, that is done in LSTM, long short-term memory. What here, as we discussed in the previous class, you have actually, so in addition to the whole say LSTM cell state, so there is a LSTM state, you have a cell state in between. What does the cell state does is, this cell state enables to do bypass the back propagation with this matrix variables W. So what is happening, see, in the previous back propagation when we were doing, so there is a W, that is a matrix involved in back propagation. So because of that, W power 10 and eigenvalues, all these things are involved. Okay, so but whereas here, if you see now, this is the LSTM cell. See, if you say, if I want to find out now dou H1 HT by dou HT minus 1, fine. So now there is one path which will come through all this W and all. Okay, for equivalent back propagation. There is another path that is through this tan H and CT and CT minus 1. Okay, so this path CT and CT minus 1, for example, see, you can see here. Only this, say, if I consider a derivative of dou HT and dou HT minus 1. Okay, so CT minus 1, for example, D is directly connected to HT minus 1. Okay, so you can see that only the things involved in back propagation from HT minus 1 to HT or HT to HT minus 1 is F. Okay, and other things are all activation functions and other things which we have left even before. Okay, so the main thing that comes is, say, if I do back propagation over H10 to dou H10 to dou H1, for example, dou H1 by dou H10. Okay, then what will happen is, the forget, say, forget F is a vector. what this role of F? Role of F is what explicitly I want to forget from current cell state to next cell state, that it will decide. So if I am interested to forget in the forward pass, it is good to forget even in the back propagation. That means if there is no important to remember in forward pass, there is no important to remember its gradients back propagation as well. So this forget gate multiplication in forward direction and reverse direction, that too element wise multiplication, doesn't lead to any of the significant problems in gradient back propagation. Whereas if we have any, say for example I, G, or any, for example even other things, then those will bring in W component in it. Okay, so let us see the equations to have a better idea. So this is like having skip connections in say residual networks, where you have actually you bypass the gradient flow through skip like forward direction you are directly concatenating, or you are directly connecting, adding. So the in reverse direction also the gradients directly flow from output to this location, this initial layers. So let us go to the expression where we have the little bit of discussion. So for this to fully understand, I suggest you people to go through Mitesh Kapra's video lecture on back propagation. I skipped it somewhat intentionally. I will give the big picture of what's happening. Okay. So here, say for example, assume that we want to find, in this discussion, what we have, yes, is nothing but C in our discussion. Okay, cell state is C in the previous discussion, and yes here. Okay, and HT is anyway same, HT. Okay, so what we want to find is dou HT by dou HT, dou HT by dou HT minus 10, for example. So what is happening here? Say you can see here dou HT is anyway function of cell state CT or ST. So dou HT by dou ST they have written, dou ST by dou ST minus 1, and so on. And then dou S. So if I write like this, what is happening? The back propagation here. So till I get to the corresponding cell state, output is involved. So only once this output gate is involved, go. And once I get to the cell state, this cell state, if I want to write as a function of previous 10 steps back cell state, I can directly write this through a diagonal matrix or element wise multiplication of all forget gates. Okay, so this capital D is diagonal matrix. Say if I am element wise multiplying two vectors, it is equivalent to multiplying the two diagonal matrices having these vectors in their diagonals. Okay, so that's what is this notation saying. So if I am trying to find the loss with respect to the 10th previous hidden state, what I need to do is only say W comes only once here, remaining else anywhere else W doesn't come. Because W come only in O, G, I, that's all. Okay, so and this forget gate is directly is only involved. See, if we need to forget, even if say in forward direction, it is good to forget even in the back propagation. That's what is the intuition, and hence the gradient diminishing problem will be largely mitigated. Is this clear? Is the discussion clear now? Otherwise, you can ask some questions as well. Hello? Saswat, who asked this question? I think Saswat only asked, right?
Sir, I am clear on this.
Okay. So I suggest still to follow his discussion so that you will get a better picture. and we can discuss again, because I think this especially given the previous detailed discussions on CNN backpropagation and feed forward network backpropagation, we have discussed only in this course the discussion on RNN like backpropagation through time. So the discussion in LSTM backpropagation is not like fully done. But I leave it to you for like to pursue independently, so that you will get a better feel of it. Right. So now the next question is on attention mechanism. We will directly go there. So I hope this like encoder decoder formulations are fine, right? So say usually what kind of understanding we should have is, if I want to perform some particular application, so what should be my encoder, and what is the better choice of my encoder, and what is a good choice of my decoder? So for example, if I want to if I want to do say machine translation, or if you want to do image captioning, or from like video based classification, so for each of these different tasks, what should be encoder and what should be decoder? That's the usual, say, video question answer, image question answering, like that. So that you should be clear on. Okay. So now let us discuss on the attention mechanism. See, usually what we need to do in attention is, encoder in each of these applications may have several encoded states. Okay, so see here in image captioning problem, each of these spatial location has a feature after say after encoding through CNN CNN feature extraction block. Okay, and each of the region have a encoded feature vector. Say assume that after this, say this may be say 512 cross 512, but after I do say few CNN like convolution and sequence of convolutions and subsampling, I may get a feature feature map dimension of 14 cross 14, and there are 512 feature maps. So each of these location in 512 cross 14 cross 14 relates to some region in this image. Okay, and similarly another thing may relate to another region in the image. Okay, and so on. So now these among these different regions are among these different feature vectors. So each feature vector is like this. Okay, so among these each feature vector, that is 512 cross 1, which feature vector is the one which is to be more important for making the subsequent decision for image captioning is a question. Okay, that is posed in attention. So for example, this region feature vectors may be more important. Okay, this is more important, this may be more important. Okay, and this also may be more important. Okay, and these are not important. Okay, these are not very much important. Okay, so now the question is, I want to naturally bring in some multiplication factors or some attention factors with which I should weigh these encodings or the states, state outputs to take my the corresponding image caption or corresponding decoding. Okay, corresponding decoding output. So the question is, how do we do it? So what we do is, say for example, assume that these so now these are these are the different states that we give encoding, and let us see the decoder as well. So now assume that what we are giving is each of these different states are like the feature vectors at different spatial locations previously. Okay, and now in another problem, like say for example machine say it is a translation. Okay, these each states correspond to the states corresponding to the input. Okay, and then now this may be more. Now the question here is, which among these to be paid more attention while giving my translation. So here may, for example, my maybe given more importance for I. Okay, and so on. So the question now is, how do we get the attention factors? So to get the attention factors, what we can do is, say one idea is, for example, assume that I want to give a additional input here. Okay, so that additional input is a vector, for example, is a vector ct. Okay, ct is the vector that I want to give. This ct is, for example, is a function of what and what. ct is a function of ct is function of previous state. Okay, ht minus 1, because see, I usually use the previous since it is a sequence that I am trying to predict or I am trying to generate in each of these decoders, I will use the previous state and the weighted, see, and then the it also should depend upon the all states. Okay, so of the decoder. Okay, previous states, say for example, if I consider here previous state is st. Okay, I think also previous state is st. Then what we have is h decoder 1. Okay, hd1 to hd, okay, whatever 5, for example. Okay, you are able to follow here what I am trying to say. The output that from the, say we want to take different weights to the encoded states, and then based on the different weighted sum of these states together with the previous state of the decoder, we would like to give an input to the next decoding. Okay, for the next state, current state. Okay, and this now the question is, how should I weigh them is the question. So usually when there are few like different feature vectors, we consider them giving as different, say, weights through like a neural network training. So what one way of doing it is, say say this function is the one which we assume that we need to learn. So we can a priori decide that there is a network layer, so which has inputs st. All these are inputs now. Given all these are inputs now, what we want to do? We want to give different weights for them. How do I learn this? So now what I have is st minus 1 to hd1. Okay, and then hd 5. All these are inputs. Okay, given to a network. Okay, and this network is supposed to learn u attention and w attention together. Okay, and after learning all this, what it gives? The probable weights that I should give for each of these states. Okay, so assume that there is a network that is used to weigh the probable, say, EJT. What is this learning? To from jth decoder output to t minus 1. Okay, so jth decoder output or jth encoder output to t decoder input. What should be the like score I should consider? Okay, this score can then be translated to softmax to the probabilities, and these probabilities are multiplied with the decoder vectors, and then it is used for giving the attention or giving the input to that state to generate better like prediction. And this is referred to as soft attention, because we are in sums we are considering the weighted sum of all the decoded all the encoded states, not just one or two encoded states. Okay, so if we consider only few of the encoded states, it is referred to as hard attention. Since we are considering all with some weighted sum, we are considering it as soft attention. Is this clear? The discussion on this? Gautam and Vamsi.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Yeah.
So we learn this U, W, and V along with the training.
Right. right?
Yes.
So it's like though we don't show here, there is a small feed forward network here, which takes all these states and try to give the weights for them.
Yes.
Yeah, based on the previous state and the other like overall cost. Yeah, overall cost.
So this might not necessarily be just for one of the states, right? It can be done for all the.
Yeah, it will be done at each time state. So each time state you will get new EJT, because that's why there is a tag of T here.
Okay, sir.
So it's costly. So you get, say, at each time state you will get for say different EJTs. Because even yes, T minus 1 is different. So alphas will become different. Their importance has to be different. Right?
So would this be very much like lots of computations are there?
Yeah. There are lots of computations are there, but no. Yeah, only thing is once you train them, so U and W may be, I think, fixed. So once you train them, so then once these are fixed, probably I think just giving an input and getting an output kind of thing.
Yes.
So in testing, it is okay. So only thing is you need to do a little bit of additional computations for to train them and to test them.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, but the output you get at each state is different, because yeah, inputs are different. Right. So, and then this attention mechanism gives, however, good understanding on what's going on in encoder decoder framework. So if you want to do purely transliteration, that's just word to word from one language to another language, it should be diagonal attention, because you are just interested in say corresponding state to corresponding state, not say in this state, say if I have 5 here, I should have 5 outputs, 5 inputs states from the encoder, 5 output states from the decoder, or outputs from the decoder. So each is one-to-one mapping. So that you can see very clearly in the second image, second attention map. So it's the confusion matrix for attention. So EJT is the matrix that they plotted for different times. Okay, and similarly, this is if you just plot the EJT values, you can also see which are the things that are more, say if I give a small para or small few sentences and want to get a summary, then which are paid more attention, etc., can be seen. Even in images, you can see which are the regions where the focus is given through attention for giving the better caption. So it gives a better explainability, and as well as some intuition on what's happening in learning and training. And there is another version called hard attention. So this is the paper, show, tell, show, attend, and tell. This is a well-known paper. You can see that actually there the discussion on both of them are well discussed. So this is, I think, Gautam's work, where they have like for NVIDIA hackathon they did, I hope. So through LS short time Fourier transform, they have acquired the speech features, and then CNN features are fed to the RNN for classification into one of the languages. So now, given this CNN capability of extracting very good features and very high level features, and taking directly spatial content or the data format into account while feature extraction, and RNNs to learn the temporal aspects, and then taking a overall summary in both the time and space given by CNNs. So they can do very great applications. So these are quite famous to apply CRNNs also in different applications. Okay, so we'll so if you have any other questions, we will discuss. Otherwise, we will stop now discussion on this. So I will discuss now hierarchical clustering if you have no doubts. You are able to see the notes now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so this is probably, I would say, simplest topic. So if you probably next to nearest neighbor classifier. Um, so anybody have listened to K-means clustering video lecture?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you so in K-means clustering, for example, or any clustering, what is the problem of clustering?
Identifying regions with regions in close band distribution along a given mean and variance.
What is that?
So identifying the points which lie in a certain region.
Okay. Okay, you're able to see notes, right? Notes is visible now?
Yes, sir.
No? Yeah, fine. Okay. So grouping the different samples into different categories is the objective of any clustering. Okay. So while grouping, what may happen is there is a, say for example, I can say that initially I have some samples. Say I have 1,000 samples. See, I may come up with, say, grouping into 3 categories. Somebody else may come up with grouping into 5 categories. Somebody else may come up with grouping into 2 categories. Okay. Even if somebody comes up with grouping into 3 categories and another person also comes up with grouping into 3 categories, among these two, which grouping is better? Because here in unsupervised clustering, we don't have the ground truth. So we can't really, for example, say one is better than the other unless we have some ground truth labels. So the question is, say in some cases we may have the ground truth labels, but we may not use in doing clustering. In validation or testing, we can use the ground truth labels. In such cases, we can establish which clustering method is better. But in general, there are some ideas for which to tell that clustering is good. So the in general idea is, say if I consider these as, say for example, if I want to group any data, then what I wish to get is the variance within the class after I group should be small. The variance between the class samples should be very high. Okay, that is one measure of having a good clustering algorithm. Okay, so and then in some of the cases I may be able to decide a priori that I would like to group onto only 2 groups. Okay, and I want say for example I want to group onto 3 groups, etc. Okay, but in some cases I may not be able to decide whether a priori whether should I group into 2 groups or should I group into only 1 group or 3 groups, etc. Okay, so K-means clustering, for example, is a method which will group the samples into a priori decided number of groups or a priori number of decided clusters. Clusters and groups are same. Okay, clusters are groups. Okay, in whatever dimension space. And what? So now the question is, if I don't know, for example, a priori, how many groups I may wish to group, but I would like to have a structure. Say if I give you some data, I would like to see that if I group into 2 clusters, how will be the clusters? If I group into 3 clusters, how will be the clusters? If I group into 4 clusters, how will be the cluster? After seeing the whole structure, I may want to decide on to sticking on to 2 clusters, 3 clusters or 4 clusters, etc. Okay, such clustering algorithms are called hierarchical clustering algorithms. Okay, so that means I may start from, say for example, if I have individual samples, say say some 6 samples, so x1, x2, x3, okay, x4, x5 and x6. Okay, I may have 6 samples. So now I may initially, say for example, in hierarchical clustering, the idea is I don't want to fix a priori what are the number of clusters. Okay, I should have provision to group into 2 clusters, 3 clusters and so on. So what this strategy people do is, see if I give you some data like this, and now if I ask you to cluster them, okay, group them. without having any knowledge, with naive, say, understanding, how do you group them? Can you give any some suggestions for doing this? Say, assume that I give you 6 samples. Each sample may be in, say, whatever dimension, 3-dimensional space, okay, or 5-dimensional space, etc. That means I have 5 feature dimensions or 6 feature dimensions, etc. And now question is, how do I group them? Can some of you tell?
Sir, first we need to know the number of groups we want to group them into.
Okay. Initially, I say that you group into 2 groups.
Then we select some 2 random points. And
So don't explain K-means clustering. Some basis. If I want to group, what should be the basis? Say any other student, I would like to answer. I would like you to answer. Some MTech students?
Sir, can't we take the mean of all points and
Yeah.
distance from that mean? Can't we tell something?
Okay, you can take mean of all points, and then what will you do? Distance from that mean to each sample you will calculate, and then what will we do? Okay,
the sample closest will assign a same label to the sample which is closest to the mean.
That won't work.
Okay, and then so you will get a, say, if you have samples like this, clusters like this, okay, then you will get better clustering by your method, right? So these will be one group and these will be another group. That's what you are saying, right? But the samples, assume that you see this scenario. I just want to group them into 3 categories. Assume that. What do I do? The scenario that I have plotted with intus at the beginning. So this I want to bring into 3 categories. How do I do? Okay, assume that I will give one more hint probably. So initially, even if I say that, say I can start from some seed point somewhere. Okay, I can start from here. Okay, I can also start from somewhere, some point and some point. I will give you 3 seed points as well. Okay, assume that. That means 3 clusters I need. I will give you 3 seed points or 3 some means you assume or whatever. 3 seed points I will give. Devayan, I have not heard from you.
Nearest neighbor.
Yeah, Ketan, you tell.
Yeah, we can do nearest neighbor for
Yeah,
each one
so
of them.
find the nearest neighbors. For example, if you have all data set, so you assume that these through are the samples of 3 different classes, and find the nearest neighbors. All the nearest neighbors of will be this class. All the nearest neighbors will be this class. All the nearest neighbors will be this class. So you grouped into 3 groups. Okay. So that is, so to find the nearest neighbors. Devayan, can you tell now what are the ways to find the nearest neighbors? You are there or not? It's muted. Okay. I think oh, anybody else also can tell. Sri Lanka? Yeah, tell. So what are the ways to find the nearest neighbors? That is the question, that's all.
Sir, distance.
Yeah, distance is one way. Okay, distance.
Correlation.
Any other ways?
Correlation.
Correlation is another way, very good. So if I have 2 vectors x and y, okay, so distance between these 2 x and y is one way for finding, okay, distance, for example, this, okay, distance of x comma y is one way of finding the similarity or the nearest neighbors. Other way is correlation, okay, correlation x comma y, that is, how do I write the correlation here? If x, y are 2 vectors, what are the, how do I write the correlation? You should tell quickly, okay, so that we can wind up our class in another 20 minutes. So some of you have next class.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine, good. So we need to wind up. Then probably we may need to have another class as well. So no, based on the pace, now it is going. So correlation, how do I find?
Dot product between those.
Yeah, X transpose Y. But usually, C vectors may be of non-unit magnitude or any numbers may be there within that feature vector. So I will normalize them most of the times for finding the similarity. Okay. So what is this called? If I normalize, what is this called?
Normalized cross
Yeah,
correlation.
normalized cross correlation, because there are two different vectors. It is normalized cross correlation. So the ways of finding closeness, okay, is either in terms of a distance metric or in terms of a correlation metric. Okay, so this is referred to as dissimilarity. So I will rub few things to make the oh, how come actually this is anything like this? As it is supposed to be this. Okay, so yeah, so for finding similarity, the closeness, we have two ways of finding. One is through dissimilarity. Okay, and otherwise through similarity or proximity. Okay, so these are referred to as proximity measure, or this is dissimilarity measure. Okay, so now let us introduce few more dissimilarity and similarity measures, because most of the clustering, all in fact, most of the clustering are initial discussion on whole evolving of the all clustering methods are based on using different similarity and dissimilarity methods, and how do they affect and how do we make use of them in different algorithms. Okay, so we will introduce at least one more dissimilarity measure. So can you tell another dissimilarity measure? Can any of you tell any another dissimilarity measure? You should tell quickly while I write.
L1 distance.
Okay, good. Okay, so L1 distance is also one of the similarity measure. That is norm of say X minus Y. It is L1 norm we call. Okay, that is what? So mod of X1 minus Y1. Okay, plus mod of X2 minus or Xi minus Yi. Okay, summation over I. Fine. So this is another dissimilarity measure. Can you tell any other dissimilarity measures? Still few more. Answer quickly so that I can move on. All this L1, L2 together all written as pth norm of a vector. Okay, X minus Y. I am directly writing X minus Y. Pth norm, how do you write this? Mod of Xi minus Yi power P and then whole power 1 by P. Okay, so this is referred to as LP. These are useful even in formulation of the cost functions. Okay, so in fact, the properties of how a particular norm results in optimizing through particular norm results in the solution was also very well investigated. Between L2, L1, there is a very vast investigations, and P lesser than 1 is non-metric. So people don't really explore P lesser than 1, but there are some, it becomes non-convex also the cost function. So with a little bit of other mathematical understanding, you can understand these terms well. Okay, so but P in between 1 to 2 or 1 and 2 are very well known. In fact, P less than 1 is also challenging how to optimize and all, and P equal to 0 is referred to as sparse optimization. Okay, so these were all different explored in different applications, not just in clustering. Okay, so this is referred to as P norm. Is there any other way that you can find the dissimilarity measure? Do you people know no other dissimilarity measure? I just want one more dissimilarity measure. So what I'm writing here? What is this dissimilarity measure doing? So please tell.
Weighted
Weight.
element.
Yeah. So different. Sorry. So different components of this distance. Say each feature may not be equally important. So it gives different weight. Can you tell one dissimilarity measure that uses this in a more so sophisticated manner? Any dissimilarity measure that uses this weighted different weighing for different errors in different features? I would like
Eigenvalues based. Like
Ah,
we can
okay.
find eigenvalues for the like
Okay.
eigenvectors and then
Maybe some eigenvalues and all fine, but more than eigenvalues, what is importantly used and widely used is what? You are able to see now the screen, I hope, right?
screen is not seen.
Not visible. Yeah, you should tell. Okay. From since long it was not visible, only just now.
Only now it is not visible.
Yeah, fine. Okay. So now you are able to see what I have written here. This distance measure, have you seen any time? You have seen or not?
Yes, sir.
Ah, where is it? Okay. Where have you seen this distance measure? This also gives a distance measure, x minus y, sorry, transpose into sigma inverse x minus y. Where have you seen this?
In Gaussian value.
Yeah. In multivariate Gaussian distribution, you have seen this, right? So,
Yes, sir.
yeah, if you raise it to minus power of e power minus, it becomes probability. Because that is inversely proportional to this. And this is a distance measure. This gives a dissimilarity, right?
Scatter matrix also has similar structure.
Yeah, scatter matrix gives importance to different features, I should consider. That's why this sigma is nothing but scatter matrix. Okay, this sigma is nothing but actually scatter matrix or covariance matrix. Okay. Okay, based on this I will weigh different components. This is referred to as Mahalanobis distance. Okay, this is referred to as Euclidean distance, you know, right? So previously, whatever we have discussed this is Euclidean distance. I hope you know Euclidean distance well. So I am not writing. So this is Mahalanobis distance. Fine. Okay. So now we'll come to some of the similarity measures. So one similarity measure we already discussed, that is the normalized cross correlation. Other similarity measure people use in clustering is referred to as Tanimoto measure. Okay, so I will write it. Okay, this is Tanimoto measure. . Okay, this discussions I am doing from Rodin Hart book. Okay, so pattern classification between Rodin Hart. Okay, so these are usually well-known similarity and dissimilarity measures. What is the range of this Tanimoto measure? Can you tell something about its range, maximum and minimum? So assuming that all x and y are positives. What's range? So x equal to y, then it is norm x square by, sorry. Okay, so in that case, norm x square by norm x square plus 2 norm x square minus norm x square, it is, so it is 1, right? What is the range of this? 1 to can some of you tell? 0 to 1. Okay, because x can be 0, in that case it is 0, otherwise 1. What is range of Euclidean distance? I am not hearing.
Can be 0 to infinity.
Yeah. So minimum value is 0 and maximum value is infinity. And 0 means what? Most similar. Here, what is most similar? X and y. When and x and y are most similar, that means two samples are most similar. For s of x comma y being what, you are able to not able to tell or what? Sorry. Some MTech student should tell. Okay, I am quickly tell. We will move on. What is the like most similar case? So this is referred to as Tanimoto measure, I said, right? So the expression is x transpose y by norm x square plus norm y square minus x transpose y. Okay, and then what is the most similar x and y? For it, what will be x comma y?
Zero, sir.
No, most similar one. Is it 0?
1.
Huh?
When x and y are equal, then
It is 1, right?
yes,
Yes.
1.
Yeah, it is 1. When x and y are equal, it is 1. No, so that's what we have written, right? So the moment we write similarity measure, it will be high for x and y are same. It will be less for x and y are different. Okay, most different. The moment we say dissimilarity measure, it is say 0 for x and y are same and high for x and y are different. Okay, so now given these similarity measures and dissimilarity measures, we want to develop a algorithm for doing hierarchical clustering. Okay, so that means to break at any number of clusters. So what I will do is I will give a very simple example now and leave. So in the next class, we will discuss more on how we can do it. Assume that we have some set of samples. So Saswat, when is the next class? 10:50 itself?
Sir, it starts at 11.
At
11.
11?
Sorry, 12. 12.
Well, okay. Good.
11.
So I think we will wind up in another 10 minutes. Okay. So I will just introduce the main concept and then we will have last class on Friday to wind up. Okay, say these are set of samples, assume that. Okay, so this is referred to as hierarchical clustering. So I will see what are I will show you what is the main idea behind this. So assume that this is sample x1. This is, for example, I will just denote with sample x1. Okay, x1, x2, x3, x4, x5. You are understanding, right, what I am writing here? Okay, and now if I want to do clustering based on either dissimilarity measure first. Okay, so based on Euclidean distance, I want to form a distance matrix now. Okay, what is this distance matrix does is, it tries to give the distance between x1 to x1, x1 to x2, x3, x4, and x5. Okay, similarly, x1 to all x1, x2, x3, x4, x5. Okay, this is what is the distance matrix. Similarly, I may also form a proximity matrix or similarity matrix later to do clustering based on it. Clustering based on dissimilarity matrix may be different, and different dissimilarity matrix may be different. Okay, because even though if I want to find closeness, say if I have some samples like this. Okay, so I will, if I have some samples like this. Okay, so if I use Euclidean distance, for example, what kind of clusters I may get? If I use Mohanana-Bayes distance, what kind of clusters I may get? Can one of you tell? Just assume that I just want to do, okay, I give a small break here. Okay, so I assume that I just want to do I want to do clustering now. Okay, so for these data sets. Okay, so now the for these samples, 2 clusters I want to bring in. If I use Euclidean distance, what will happen? If I use Mohanana-Bayes distance or the covariance matrix based distance, what will happen? Can one of you tell? Some make a good guess. Those who know, quickly tell. Okay, so that you will save our time, all students' time, in fact, and my time as well. Euclidean distance. What will happen? What is the nature of clusters? See, Euclidean distance usually results in circular clusters. Okay, if I consider this sample as my seed point, okay, I say assume that these are the seed points. Assume that this is one seed point and this is one seed point I start with. So Euclidean distance roughly may give this one cluster, okay, somewhat, okay, this may cluster, this may somewhat may cluster, okay, assume that. But Mohanana-Bayes distance if I use, what will happen? It takes the covariance into account. So I may get these two as the clusters. Okay, so Euclidean distance clusters are somewhat different than the Mohanana-Bayes distance cluster. So which is better? It depends upon the application. So variance of the samples also is taken into account in Mohanana-Bayes distance. So it clusters like this. Where Euclidean distance, it may cluster like this. Okay, so that based on the dissimilarity measure, the clusters will be different. Similarly, based on the similarity measures, also clusters will be different. Okay, so now let us say now if I want to, I will give you the values of distances as well. And what I want is, I want you to come up with the clustering mechanism. I will not write below because it is symmetric, right? So I will write only here. So now this is the distance matrix. Now, based on this, to make a gradual clustering, assume that I start initially with say 5 samples. See, there are 2 ways of doing clustering. That is, one is to gradually increase. Say you start each single sample as one cluster and start grouping to like closest samples first, and then next closest samples, and then next closest samples, and so on. It is referred to as agglomerative clustering. Okay, agglomerative means you are trying to bring you are trying to group gradually. Okay, so now which 2 should be grouped first? Say these are the samples and these are the distances of samples. Okay, which 2 should be grouped first? Sai Pavan, can you tell now quickly? Tell quickly, we don't have much time.
X1 and X2.
Yeah, very good. So we'll start with x1 and x2. Okay. And then what next? X1 and x2. This distance is smaller, that is 1. So we group them first. What is the next group I should do? See, this is now already formed a cluster, C1, but I want to group the next one to this group or to any other new group I want to form. Which is the next one I should form? Muhammad.
X4 and X5.
What is that?
X4 and X2.
And
X4
X5.
and X5 or X3 and X5? Huh?
X4 and X5.
Yeah, because their distance is next closer. Okay. So, and then what is the next group I can form? Next group is
X3 and X4.
X3 and X4. That is 1.4. Okay. See, please note that this is referred to as dendrogram. Okay. This is a tree-like structure where I can break anywhere. Okay. So now what is the next group? Anyway, I have to group both of these. Now, say if I want to have two clusters, I am already done. X1, X2 is one cluster. X3, X4, X5 is another cluster. Okay. Even if I want to have three clusters, I am done. X1, X2 is one cluster. X3 is another cluster. X4, X5 is another cluster. So now all together I will group. Now what is the distance with which I group now? Writing the distance with which I group is also important, because so that I know we can easily depict with what distance we are grouping. This distance is 0 with itself, and this is 1, and this is 1.5 or 1.4. And what is the distance here? 1.5, assume that in bar. And what is the distance here? With which I group x1, x2 with the next cluster. X1, x2 with the next cluster. What is the distance I should write here? X1, x2, I should group with any of these x3, x4 and x5. What is the distance I should write here? Closest distance or minimum distance? Say x2, for example, it can be grouped to x3, x4 and x5 with minimum distance of what? X2.
4.2. 4.2.
Right. And x1 can be grouped with x3, x4 and x5 with minimum distance of what? 5. And among x1, x2, which can be grouped with minimum distance with x3, x4, x5?
X2.
Yeah, that is with 4.2, right? So this is referred to as dendrogram. The advantage of forming this dendrogram is I can break at any location. So if I break here, I will get actually C1, two clusters, C1 being, okay, x1 comma x2, okay, and C2 being x3 comma x4 comma x5. If I ask you to give 3 clusters, then I can break it here, okay, and then I can get 3 clusters, right? Here you get 2 clusters, and so on. Yes or no? Is this process understood? Is this process understood or not?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So if this process is understood, now what I will do is I will give a similarity matrix now. Okay. So based on the similarity matrix, I suggest you to do the form a dendrogram by the next class. Okay. So that actually I will discuss then in the next class a little bit of 2 algorithms of hierarchical clustering, that is single link and complete link algorithms. Okay. Which use cluster to cluster different slightly and differently. Okay. So now this is the matrix, proximity matrix I am giving. What is this matrix? Proximity matrix is similarity based matrix. So what is similarity between x1 to x1 here? Yeah, fine. So anyway, this is there even in the notes which I have already uploaded in Moodle. Okay. or you can see here, but in the notes, I hope answer is also there, but I suggest you to do yourself because it is very simple to do, so that you will know whether you are, while doing, you will get some doubts in this. Okay, in simple things, while doing only, you will get some doubts. Otherwise, things look very clear. Okay, so this is similarity based. In fact, the similarity measure used in this is Tanamato measure. Okay, this is just for optional x1 to x5. I have written x1 to x5. And then this is the proximity matrix, because see, if I give you a matrix, will you be able to tell whether it is a dissimilarity measure and dissimilarity measure or not? If I give you a matrix, will you be able to tell or not? Yes, right? How will you tell whether this is a similarity measure? You will be able to tell because x1 to x1 is one.
Evaluate the diagonal.
Yeah, so by looking at the diagonal, basing this similarity measure, you make a dendrogram. Now dendrogram starts from 1 and goes to 0. Okay, more similar. So x1, x2, x5 you keep and make a small dendrogram and make 2 clusters and 3 cluster breaks and see whether they are same as the distance based dissimilarity based one or different. Okay, that you do as the exercise before this Friday, and in this Friday we will wind up the course. Okay, so meanwhile you can go through the other video lecture on clustering. Fine. Okay, thank you then. So if you have any quick things, you will spend 1 minute. Otherwise, I am done from my side. Thank you. Fine. Okay, thank you. Bye.